this time! With a mob!
Oh shit, wait, no!
Dedicated journalist in St. Roma village. He has been working relentlessly to expose BTH, a pharmaceutical company that has been dumping toxic waste into rivers and lakes for years. Shortly after, his co-worker JJ buzzes the door and he lets her in. JJ proudly reveals that she has obtained evidence that will undoubtedly expose BTH's corrupt practices and ultimately bring down Robert Garbinger, the company's CEO. Through the security camera feed, they notice that a group of men had followed JJ. Mel tells her to run with the evidence. She jumps off a railing and unfortunately damages the hardware containing the proof, but manages to escape. Upstairs, the men close in on Mel and kill him with a harpoon gun. His death is brutal and tragic. The men decide not to pursue JJ, dismissing her as a nobody since she no longer has the evidence. Elsewhere in St. Roma village, Winston wakes up to prepare breakfast for his stepson, Wade. He lost his wife Shell to cancer several years ago, and Wade has never been the same, completely shutting himself off. Winston can't even afford therapy for him, as his job as a janitor at BTH barely covers their daily meals. Later, Winston is about to take Wade to his school bus stop when they both notice their neighbor Daisy being threatened by a man named Spence, who happens to be the son of a local gang leader. He pressures her to sell her property. Daisy reluctantly agrees, then asks for her cat back, but Spence heartlessly throws the cat out onto the street. Winston brings Daisy's cat back to her, but Wade walks off, furious at Winston for not helping Daisy. With a sigh, Winston explains that sometimes doing nothing is the right choice, and that Wade will understand when he's older. To change the topic, he asks Wade about his dance audition today. Wade stays silent. Winston says wistfully, "Your mom would be so proud of you." An hour later, Winston arrives at BTH. He mops the floors and takes out the trash. Suddenly, he receives a call from the hospital regarding his test results. At the hospital, Dr. Walla informs Winston that the headaches he's been experiencing over the past few weeks are actually due to an aggressive brain tumor. He has approximately 6 months to a year to live. Winston is devastated, worrying about Wade's future. The doctor mentions an advanced medicine that could treat the tumor and says Winston's work insurance might actually cover it. Winston immediately calls BTH's insurance agent, explaining that he needs money for medication for his tumor. The agent informs him that his platinum tier plan does not include the gold tier plan, which is required for his treatment. Winston is crushed. Meanwhile, Robert Garbinger, the CEO of BTH, meets with his brother Fritz, who is also the head of security at BTH. Robert is furious at Fritz for letting JJ escape. Fritz blames the Killer Nuts, a rap group that works for Robert, but Robert dismisses his excuse and orders Fritz to kill JJ at any cost. Later, Fritz visits the Killer Nuts and commands them to find JJ. The group tracks her to a house she's renting, but when they search it, they come up empty-handed. After they leave, JJ takes out her bag and quietly slips away, ignoring her landlord's questions. That afternoon, Winston nervously watches the auditions of his classmates. When it's finally his turn, the other students jeer and boo him. Embarrassed and scared, he walks out. Later, he discovers that someone has posted a video of him walking away on social media. Night falls. Winston searches online for BTH health plans and comes across a news article stating that BTH is organizing a fundraising gala tonight. At that moment, Wade comes home accompanied by Daisy. She explains that she saw Wade looking upset and decided to drop him off. Winston thanks her and apologizes for not helping earlier. Daisy brushes it off, saying, "You saved Mr. Treats." Then Winston asks Wade about his audition, but he stays silent. Winston remarks that although Shelley was never a great performer, her confidence and stage presence always made her shine. To lift Wade's spirits, he turns on some music and puts on a tutu. Wade looks at him, unimpressed at first, but slowly begins to smile. Wade then picks up the envelope containing Winston's brain scan, but Winston quickly snatches it back, insisting it's nothing serious. He tells Wade he has some work to take care of, and leaves. He arrives at the gala and sneaks in through the back door. Meanwhile, Robert and his assistant Kissy attempt to win over the mayor's support to secure funding for BTH. Then, Robert spots Spence and quietly follows him. Smiling, Robert greets Thad, the leader of a notorious gang and the one who initially funded BTH. Thad sternly orders Robert to get his act together and start producing medicines that don't cause extreme side effects, a factor that has led to BTH's stock falling drastically. Later, Robert receives the Citizen Shepherd Award. After the ceremony, Winston approaches Robert's table and introduces himself. He explains that he's been working at BTH as a janitor for 13 years and that his insurance doesn't cover the medicine he desperately needs. He also shares that his son has already lost his mother. Kissy and the others at the table mock Winston, but Robert instructs Kissy to take care of him. Overjoyed, Winston thanks Robert and leaves with Kissy. She tells him to wait downstairs, saying she'll get the voucher. Unfortunately, Winston gets locked out and overhears Kissy and Robert laughing at him. Robert coldly tells Kissy to fire Winston. Heartbroken and furious, Winston drives to the BTH factory and, using his ID card, sneaks inside. JJ, seeing her opportunity, also slips in and begins collecting toxic waste to expose BTH. Meanwhile, Fritz spots them and calls in the killer nuts. Broken and betrayed, Winston grabs his mop, dips it into the radioactive waste, and in a desperate act, uses it to steal from his own company. As he runs, he collides with JJ. The stolen money bursts into flames from a chemical reaction. The killer nuts arrive. JJ steals Winston's card and flees, with Winston right behind her. The killer nuts corner Winston, forcing JJ to leave him behind. Winston pleads for his life, but they shoot him dead. Furious, Fritz scolds them for killing the wrong person and orders them to dispose of the body. The gang dumps Winston into the chemical waste. As JJ tries to escape, she is unknowingly spotted by the killer nuts. She then heads to meet Mel to hand over the evidence, the same scene we saw at the beginning. Meanwhile, Winston screams as his cells and DNA mutate, transforming him into a monstrous alien-like being. He stumbles towards his home, noticing Daisy signing away her property.
Climbing him to his house, Winston hears Wade's worried voice asking him to call back. As he tries to enter, Wade throws a bowl at him, causing Winston to crash onto Spence's car. Alarmed, Spence fires at him, but Winston's body heals instantly. He charges at Spence, trying to disarm him, and ends up severing his arm. A crowd gathers, Winston flees, while Daisy quickly retrieves the land deed she had signed. The police arrive, and witnesses describe Winston as a terrifying creature. One even claims he ate a baby and had a tail. Winston disappears into the forest to hide. The next morning, Winston wakes up in a tent and notices a man nearby. The man introduces himself as Guthrie, and Winston introduces himself in return. Guthrie explains that he found Winston unconscious in the woods and brought him to the tent. "What happened?" Guthrie asks. Winston quietly replies that he's dying. Guthrie mocks him, saying, "Everyone's dying, so your situation isn't that special." Winston mutters, "That makes me feel so much better." Winston sadly admits that his son thinks he's a monster, to which Guthrie replies, "Then show him your good side." Winston notices his mop, and Guthrie explains that he recovered it from a nearby lagoon. Winston takes it and sets off to find Wade. Meanwhile, Wade watches the news, where a reporter mentions that a restaurant called Miss Meat has been taken hostage by an extremist political group called the Nasty Lads. The group's leader is enraged over the restaurant's recent woke decision to change its mascot from Mr. Meat to Miss Meat. Passing by the restaurant, Winston witnesses the chaos outside. Inside, terrified customers and employees are being terrorized by armed men, who even mock a blind woman. Police try to negotiate, urging the extremists to release the hostages, but the group responds with gunfire. Having had enough, Winston storms inside, turning the restaurant into a bloodbath and mercilessly wiping out the attackers. When he steps back outside, police raise their guns at him, but a restaurant worker stops them, shouting that Winston saved everyone's lives. The news quickly interviews Winston, asking him how it feels to be a hero. He looks straight into the camera and simply says, "Sometimes you gotta do something." Winston retreats to a rooftop to relieve himself, only to discover that his urine has become acidic. Meanwhile, Spence, still alive, points angrily at the TV. Thawed furious, orders his men to hunt down and kill the small green creature responsible for Spence's condition. At Robert's mansion, Robert berates Kissy and Fritz for allowing Winston's mutation, pointing out that the creature on the news and Winston are the same person. He then demands to know how the transformation happened. One scientist explains that BTH's waste has always been toxic, but when combined with an extremely rare genetic marker, it can trigger powerful mutations. Robert orders them to replicate the mutation, but they reply that it's impossible without Winston himself. Robert instructs Fritz to capture him. Fritz hesitates, saying he has a child. Meanwhile, JJ visits Winston's home and tells Wade everything that has happened, explaining that she believes her father has the power to expose BTH. Wade corrects her, stepdad, and accuses her of dragging Winston into this mess. JJ insists he was already involved, saying she saw him running away with the stolen money. She also reveals that her mother died because of BTH's Biowaster drug. Moments later, the killer nuts arrive at Winston's house, forcing JJ and Wade to flee. One of them secretly plants a tracking device on Wade. Elsewhere, Wade and JJ encounter Winston. Wade demands the truth. Winston admits he has a brain tumor and tried to steal money from BTH to afford his treatment. Hurt, Wade asks, "You were going to die and didn't tell me?" Before Winston can respond, Thodd's men show up and open fire. JJ grabs Wade and runs despite his protest to help Winston. Winston regains consciousness, kills one of the shooters, and escapes. The gang continues to chase him, but he hunts them down one by one. Meanwhile, the killer nuts track down JJ and Wade. They shoot JJ and kidnap Wade. While searching for his son, Winston finds JJ unconscious on the roadside and rushes her to Guthrie. Guthrie tells him she's dead, but acting quickly, Winston drips his healing blood onto her gunshot wound. Miraculously, she revives. At Robert's mansion, Fritz delivers Wade. Robert orders his men to lock the boy inside the shed, and they obey. Inside, Kissy expresses concern that Robert's plan might be too cruel, but he dismisses her worries, telling her to trust him. Back near the lagoon, Winston and JJ reunite, preparing for what comes next. She thanks him for saving her. Winston grimly explains that they took Wade to get to him. JJ nods and reminds him that the last time they met was the night her mentor Mel was killed while trying to expose BTH. Winston, determined, says we will expose BTH for what they really are. Together, they head to Roberts Park where the killer nuts are performing their usual Friday routine. JJ disconnects their microphones while Winston grabs one of his own. He brutally takes them all down. The crowd is shocked to see Winston killing their favorite band. Afterward, he addresses the audience saying the killer nuts are sick people who do dirty work like killing for Robert. They all got rich while you all suffered.
Winston and JJ interrogate one of the killer nuts members, who reveals Robert's location. They head to Robert's mansion and notice two guards at the entrance. JJ attempts to distract them, but both end up shooting each other. They advance onto the mansion's lawn and encounter strange statues. As they get closer, the statues release a gas, knocking both unconscious. Hours later, they wake up chained as BTH employees prepare to take samples from Winston. Robert mocks him, explaining that Winston's attempt to steal could now make him millions if his employees replicate the mutation. The employees take sample after sample until Winston passes out. Robert carries the sample outside and comes face to face with Thad, who is watching the news. The broadcast reports that following Winston's allegations, the Federal Bureau has begun investigating BTH. Thad glares at Robert, warning that he's a loose end who could inform on him if arrested. As Thad draws his gun, Robert asks for one last drink and consumes a sip of Winston's sample. The serum grants him feral strength, and he kills Thad and his associates. Moments later, Kissy enters the room to find Robert completely unhinged, his body rejecting the serum. Desperate, she consumes the last drop herself and orders the employees to perfect Winston's mutation. She also commands them to kill Wade. Fritz intervenes, saying he's just a child. Kissy, enraged, begins beating him, insisting she's doing all of this to protect her brother. Back with Winston, JJ shouts for him to wake up, warning that they plan to kill Wade. She blames herself for being caught, saying Mel would be furious at me. Winston, thinking quickly, uses his acidic urine to unlock both his and JJ's chains. They rush outside and spot Wade locked in the shed. Winston attempts to take out a guard, but a bullet strikes a gas tank, causing the shed to explode. He is devastated. Robert emerges, wielding an axe. They fight, with Winston gaining the upper hand and nearly killing Robert until Wade emerges alive. It turns out Fritz had saved him before the explosion. Wade calls Winston dad for the first time and pleads with him not to kill Robert, saying, "You are a good person." Robert launches a final attack, but Winston impales him with his mop. Winston rushes to Wade, only for Kissy to strike him with a wooden plank and slash Fritz's throat. She turns on JJ, but Winston tackles her onto spilled fuel, which ignites, killing Kissy. Winston wakes up in the hospital and sees Dr. Walla, accompanied by a blind federal agent, one of the hostages he saved at Miss Meat. With Robert's crimes fully exposed, the agent agrees to sweep everything about him under the rug, though others associated with Robert face justice. Dr. Walla also reveals that Winston's mutation has cured his tumor. Outside his room, Winston is greeted by dozens of grateful citizens, including Wade, who embraces him. Fritz has survived, though he now communicates through a voice modulator and will likely face jail time. Winston proudly watches as Wade performs at the school's talent show.